Albert wasn't precisely a lonely man, though the term occasionally wandered into his thoughts, like an uninvited guest at the edge of his consciousness. His life was wrapped in a comforting cocoon of predictability, each day unfolding in a rhythm that spoke of serene acceptance and quiet routines. The first signs of morning arrived with the familiar rustle of the newspaper, its pages crackling with the promise of another day, delivered just before the sun began its ascent. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. The rich, heady aroma of strong, dark tea soon permeated the kitchen, brewed to an almost inky blackness in the same pot that had witnessed countless dawns. These mornings, steeped in ritual, were spent in a leisurely, almost contemplative manner, tending to his garden, now a verdant jungle of untamed weeds. Though the invasive greenery often seemed to triumph, the act of nurturing the garden was a sacred ritual, offering him solace and a semblance of purpose amidst the encroaching chaos. His meals were simple yet sincere leftovers reheated with a practiced touch, or a modest sandwich when his appetite was fleeting. These meals, prepared with unpretentious care, provided sustenance without extravagance. His evenings, too, followed a gentle consistency, marked by the soothing presence of a radio and the flickering, nostalgic images of old westerns on the television. His cherished armchair, worn and perfectly shaped to fit his form, had become an unspoken monument to the years since Mary had passed away, a silent echo of their shared life and enduring love. The house itself seemed to breathe with a quiet presence, its very walls holding a subtle sense of melancholy that even the lively chatter of the radio could not dispel. Albert reassured himself that this wasn't loneliness but rather the natural progression of life. He missed Mary, of course, longed for the effortless conversations and her intuitive understanding of his unspoken thoughts. Yet, he reasoned, life was meant to be lived and then to end, wasn't it? The unexpected knock on his door one sunny afternoon caught him off guard, breaking the monotony of his well-worn routine. He wasn't accustomed to visitors, especially not at such an unusual hour, wedged between lunch and supper. On the doorstep stood a young woman, a girl really, with fiery red hair spilling from beneath a knit cap and a backpack that appeared to dwarf her. "I'm lost," she confessed, her sheepish grin casting a sudden, unexpected warmth into the chilly air. "I'm looking for the Albert Oakwood campsite, but I must have taken a wrong turn." Her voice, bright and tinged with a breathless energy, was the kind one might expect from someone accustomed to the bustling city, a stark contrast to Albert's familiar small-town life. He knew every back road and hidden path in his town, and the campsite was clearly in the opposite direction. The house held a quiet, almost palpable stillness that seemed to cling to its walls, a sadness that lingered despite the familiar sounds of newscasters attempting to fill the void. Albert told himself that this was not loneliness but rather the natural progression of life. He missed Mary deeply, not just her presence but the way she had effortlessly understood him, her ability to read his moods without the need for words. Yet he accepted that life was a journey meant to be lived fully, only to eventually come to its natural conclusion. It was the way of the world, wasn't it? One radiant afternoon, as the sun bathed the world in a warm glow, an unexpected knock at the door startled him from his routine. Visitors were an uncommon occurrence for Albert, and certainly not at such an unusual hour, straddling the line between lunch and supper. When Albert opened the door, he was greeted by a young woman barely more than a girl, really. Her vivid red hair spilled out from beneath a knitted cap, and her backpack looked almost comically oversized compared to her slight frame. "I'm lost," she admitted with a sheepish grin that seemed to cut through the quietude of the afternoon like a splash of color on a blank canvas. "I'm searching for the Albert Oakwood campsite, but I must have veered off course somewhere along the way." Her voice was vibrant, carrying a breathless quality that hinted at a life lived amid the frenetic pulse of the city. Albert, who had spent his entire life nestled within the embrace of this small town, was intimately familiar with every meandering back road and well-worn footpath. He knew with absolute certainty that the campsite was located in the opposite direction, a realization that offered him a blend of clarity and an unexpected sense of amusement. As he stood there, momentarily taken aback by her presence, something else stirred within him, an old, rusty instinct that had lain dormant beneath layers of routine and solitude for years. "Well, it's getting dark," he heard himself say, the words emerging with a sudden, almost unexpected urgency. "You're welcome to stay the night. I've got a spare room, and you don't seem the sort to cause me any trouble." The very act of extending such an invitation caught him off guard. The words seemed to float in the stillness of the evening, their reverberations filling the air with a sense of surprise. As he considered the offer he had just made, a pang of doubt tugged at his conscience. The voice of common sense warned him of the potential risks, cautioning that inviting a stranger into his home might be an imprudent decision. Yet, beneath this practical concern, another part of him, a deeply ingrained, almost forgotten instinct, whispered that this moment represented an opportunity for something new and possibly enriching. The young woman, whose name was Jessica, accepted his offer with a radiant smile that seemed to brighten the dimming light of the day. As she stepped inside, her presence seemed to breathe new life into the house. The modest, somewhat neglected space suddenly seemed to come alive with her energetic vitality. Jessica's enthusiastic chatter about her travels and experiences began to fill the air, her stories about bustling night markets in Thailand and the vast expanses of the Australian outback weaving a tapestry of color and adventure that contrasted sharply with Albert's routine life. As she settled into the spare room, her backpack spilling out a jumble of mismatched items and souvenirs, Albert found himself grappling with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Her constant phone chirps, messages from friends far away, initially grated on his nerves. Yet as the evening wore on, he found himself drawn into her world. He began to ask questions about the exotic places she had visited and the curious foods she had encountered. Part of him still longed for the quiet and familiarity of his routines, but another part, one he had nearly forgotten existed, felt a stirring sense of excitement and possibility. When Jessica suggested they explore the town's waterfall, Albert reluctantly agreed, viewing it as a mere distraction until she could be on her way. However, as they walked together, he found himself genuinely enjoying the outing. Her attempt to mimic the birdsong they heard along the trail made him laugh, a sound that had been rare and precious for years. The afternoon slipped by in a blur of laughter and shared moments, leaving behind a sense of lightness and renewal. The next few days saw a ripple of change within Albert's life. The small town's gossip began to buzz with whispers of his unexpected guest. Mrs. Bennett, ever the town's social observer, cornered him at the grocery store with a glint of curiosity in her eye. "Heard you've got a young lady staying with you, Albert," she teased, her voice carrying a playful undertone. My, how things change," he stammered an explanation about helping a lost traveler, but as Mrs. Bennett's words lingered, Albert felt a fluttering sensation he hadn't experienced in years, not quite romantic, but undeniably pleasant. As Albert and Jessica continued to work together, the process of decluttering his attic unearthed not just physical items but also memories and emotions. Among the items they discovered was a box of Mary's old recipe books, each one a testament to the warmth and love she had infused into their home. As they sorted through the clutter, Jessica's stories about her adventures combined with her surprising efficiency in organizing brought a sense of lightness to the task. The once overwhelming mess began to clear, leaving behind spaces on the shelves and an unexpected sense of relief. One evening, as the last of the summer sunlight filtered through the kitchen window, Albert overheard Jessica on the phone. Her voice, normally so vibrant, carried a note of concern as she discussed money troubles and a desperate need for a place to stay. A knot of suspicion tightened in his gut, and his practical mind replayed the town gossip with a sharper edge. Mary's gentle teasing voice seemed to echo in his mind, "You always were too trusting." Albert, despite this, he remembered Jessica's kindness, her warmth, and the genuine connection they had formed. Without fully deciding, he found himself knocking on her door, his voice gruff but softened by a touch of warmth. "Miss Jessica," he said, "it seems it might be helpful for both of us if you stayed a while longer. That attic of mine isn't going to clear itself." Jessica spoke animatedly about bustling night markets in Thailand, the vast and hauntingly serene expanses of the Australian outback, and the curious customs she encountered in each place. Her descriptions were so vivid that they painted a picture of far-off lands in Albert's mind, places he had only glimpsed through the lens of documentaries or read about in travel books. Her stories captivated him, drawing him into a world he had long relegated to the realm of dreams and fantasies. Her phone, a relentless source of connectivity, chirped incessantly with a steady stream of messages, each one a window into her dynamic social life. Initially, the ceaseless notifications grated on Albert's nerves, their bright pings starkly contrasting with his serene, predictable life. Yet, as the hours passed, he found himself inexplicably drawn into her world. Each story she shared about a new destination or an exotic food sparked curiosity in him. He began to ask questions about the temple she had mentioned, or the peculiar-looking fruit she had shown him in a photo. The snippets of her life, though vastly different from his own, began to bridge a gap he hadn't realized was so wide. In the quiet of his evenings, Albert found himself increasingly intrigued by Jessica's tales. The familiar routine of his life, a cup of tea, a well-worn armchair, and the comforting hum of old westerns on the television began to feel like a backdrop to the unfolding drama of her stories. His initial hesitation about inviting a stranger into his home slowly gave way to a growing sense of excitement. The disruption to his established order, once daunting, started to seem like a refreshing change, a breath of fresh air he hadn't known he needed. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast long shadows across the room, Jessica proposed a walk to the town's waterfall, a suggestion that Albert initially viewed as a mere diversion. However, as they strolled together, he found himself enjoying the outing more than he had anticipated. The crisp evening air, the sound of the cascading water, and Jessica's animated commentary combined to create a sense of spontaneity and joy that had been absent from his life for years. Their daily routine began to shift, incorporating new rhythms and activities. Jessica's presence was a constant reminder of the world beyond his small town, a world brimming with possibilities and new experiences. As they tackled the task of clearing out his attic, they uncovered more than just physical objects. Each item a dusty old photo, a forgotten book triggered memories and emotions that Albert had long kept at bay. Among these discoveries was a box of Mary's old recipe books, each one a relic of the warmth and love she had brought into his life. As Jessica eagerly delved into the recipe books, her excitement was palpable. She discovered Mary's famous apple crumble recipe and marveled at the thought of recreating it. Seeing her enthusiasm, Albert felt a pang of nostalgia mingled with a newfound appreciation for the past. The decision to give Jessica Mary's old recipes felt right. It was a gesture that bridged the gap between his old life and the new experiences Jessica was bringing into his world. The day came when Jessica's time in Albert's home drew to a close. She had found a job at the local diner and secured a small apartment above an old bookstore, nothing extravagant, but a place where she could carve out a new chapter in her life. As she packed her belongings, Albert assisted with the move, their conversations punctuated by laughter and the occasional silence filled with mutual understanding. When Jessica handed him a small gift, a framed photo from their attic expedition, a snapshot of him in those outlandish flares with Mary by his side, Albert was touched. The photo, once buried among old memories, now stood as a testament to the unexpected joy that had entered his life. "A thank you," Jessica said softly, her eyes reflecting gratitude, "for reminding me it's okay to start over, for showing me that even old houses can hold hidden treasures." As he shut the door behind her, the emptiness of his home felt sharper, but not as he had expected. The photo, now prominently displayed, was more than just a memory. It was a symbol of the unexpected changes and new beginnings that had blossomed within his walls. Albert found himself drawn to Mary's old recipe book, a sense of warmth spreading through him. He wrapped the book carefully and made his way to Jessica's new apartment, hoping to inspire her new kitchen with a touch of the past. Her surprised laugh when she opened the door chased away any remaining hesitation. "This is for you," Albert said, handing her the package. "Figured you might need some inspiration for your new kitchen." Jessica's eyes lit up as she saw the faded cover of Mary's recipes. Mary's recipes. "Albert, you shouldn't have." "It's no use to me sitting on the shelf," he replied, a touch of warmth softening his usually gruff demeanor. Besides, he added with a hint of mischief, "I never could master that apple crumble." A week later, Albert saw flyers for a community walking group on the library notice board. For a moment he hesitated, his hand hovering over the contact number. Could he really do this? Walk with strangers and make idle chatter? The old Albert would have retreated, finding an excuse to stay in his comfortable solitude. But Jessica's determined smile, which had left a lasting impression on him, nudged him forward. With a deep breath, he dialed the number. To his surprise, the friendly voices on the other end welcomed him warmly into the group. He even found himself cracking a joke with Mrs. Bennett at the market the next day, her teasing only adding to his newfound sense of belonging. Albert wasn't a changed man overnight, but he wasn't quite the same man who had opened the door to a lost girl that sunny afternoon either. His days still followed a comforting rhythm, and his garden still grew more weeds than flowers. Yet within the predictable routine of his life, there was now a new melody, a sense of openness and possibility that had begun to weave its way into his existence. He wasn't lonely, not in the way he had been before. Instead, he found himself embracing the unexpected, discovering that perhaps life's true essence lay in its ability to surprise and transform us, even in the most ordinary of moments. Jessica, with her determined and enthusiastic spirit, wasn't about to let him slip back into his old ways. With a spark of determination in her eye, she insisted on exploring the local waterfall she had heard about from town gossip. Initially, it felt like a duty, a way to occupy time until she could continue her journey. But as they ventured out together, he found himself genuinely laughing at her endearing, albeit clumsy, attempt to mimic the birdsong they encountered along the way. Before he realized it, an entire afternoon had slipped away, leaving behind a sense of lightness and joy that had been absent from his life for far too long. In a small town where gossip traveled faster than the speed of light, Albert found himself the subject of considerable intrigue. Mrs. Bennett, known for her insatiable curiosity and a playful sparkle in her eye, managed to corner him at the local grocery store one morning. "I hear tell you've got a young lady staying with you, Albert." My, oh my, how the world shifts beneath our feet. Her words, delivered with a mixture of surprise and cheeky amusement, left Albert momentarily flustered. He mumbled something about helping a lost traveler, but deep down. Mrs. Bennett's remark stirred a flutter of emotions he hadn't felt in years, not quite romantic but undeniably significant. This unexpected feeling, like a gentle nudge from a distant past, reminded him that life still held the capacity for new experiences and emotional connections. The subtle changes began to manifest in the everyday rhythm of his life. Working alongside Jessica to tackle the clutter in his attic, Albert discovered a box filled with Mary's cherished recipe books. The sight of them, nestled among layers of dust and disuse, was like finding a piece of warmth and familiarity in the midst of his otherwise mundane existence. Although the attic was a chaotic mess, Jessica's boundless energy and enthusiasm transformed the daunting task into something almost enjoyable. Between her animated stories of thrilling adventures like bungee jumping in New Zealand or bartering for exotic trinkets in bustling Bangkok markets, she organized the attic with surprising skill. Her efficiency not only cleared the physical clutter but also seemed to lift the emotional weight from the space. The once overstuffed shelves now had breathing room, and the attic felt less like a stifling chamber of forgotten memories and more like a space where the past and present could coexist comfortably. One evening, as the golden hues of the setting sun bled through the kitchen window, Albert overheard Jessica in a hushed, anxious conversation on her phone. Her voice carried an undercurrent of worry, speaking of financial difficulties and an urgent need for somewhere to stay. A pang of suspicion twisted in his gut, and a knot of unease tightened as he replayed the town gossip in his mind. The whispers of potential trouble seemed to intertwine with Mary's disapproving, yet affectionate, voice, reminding him of his tendency to be overly trusting. Despite the warnings and the echo of past advice, he found it difficult to ignore the genuine kindness Jessica had shown. Her warmth, exemplified in her easy laughter and the way she had embraced his father's old records with such joy, lingered in his thoughts. In an uncharacteristic impulse, he knocked on her door, his heart racing with a mixture of apprehension and an odd sense of resolve. Clearing his throat, he spoke, his voice sounding gruffer than he intended. "Miss Jessica," he began, trying to steady his voice, "it seems it might be mutually beneficial if you stayed a bit longer. That attic of mine isn't going to clear itself, and I could use the help." His offer, though spontaneous, was more than just a practical solution to an immediate problem. It was an invitation to continue a connection that had brought a renewed sense of lightness and warmth into his life. It was also an acknowledgement of the unexpected joy and companionship Jessica had introduced into his world, a small but significant departure from the solitary existence he had grown accustomed to. Instead of resorting to confrontation or addressing his concerns directly, Albert decided to take a different approach. He surprised both himself and Jessica by offering her a short-term job to help with the ongoing decluttering. He proposed a simple arrangement payment in exchange for continued assistance with the task that had surprisingly become more enjoyable with her presence. This new rhythm of their days quickly took on a unique and revitalizing pattern. Together, they began uncovering forgotten treasures that had lain dormant in the dusty recesses of his home. Among the discoveries was an old pocket watch belonging to his father, its surface tarnished but still holding a sense of nostalgia. Another find was a chipped teapot that sparked a heartfelt story about Mary's disastrous first attempt at baking, a memory that brought both laughter and a touch of bittersweet nostalgia. Jessica's eyes would light up with excitement at each new discovery, eagerly pressing Albert for the stories behind these relics of his past. Her enthusiasm breathed new life into these old objects, turning their decluttering sessions into a journey through his memories. The changes didn't go unnoticed by the small town. It started with Albert's fresh haircut, a result of Jessica's horrified reaction to his unkempt appearance. She had insisted he needed a trim, and the transformation was immediate and noticeable. Albert found himself smiling more, a genuine expression of contentment that seemed to reach his eyes, much to the delight of Mrs. Bennett, who couldn't resist teasing him about his newfound charm and the presence of his young house guest. One afternoon, deep in the garage, they came across a box of old photo albums. As Jessica flipped through the pages, she burst into laughter. "Get a load of those flares," she exclaimed, pointing to a younger version of Albert with a wildly styled haircut hidden under a floppy hat. Albert couldn't help but grin at the sight of his younger self, a man who had once been quite the dashing figure. "You were quite the looker back then," Albert, Jessica teased, her playful tone infectious. His smile widened, the settled quiet of his life slowly being chipped away by her presence. Although he still treasured his routine, he found that he now welcomed the space it had for unexpected joys. Much of this new, unexpected joy involved technology, an area where Jessica took the lead. First, she taught him how to search for specific gardening tips online. It's like a giant encyclopedia, but way faster, she explained with a grin. Then came the challenge of ordering groceries online. It's like magic, Albert, I swear, Jessica enthused, perched on a kitchen stool and furiously typing away on his old laptop. You just pick what you want, click a button, and they deliver it right to your door. Albert eyed the screen with skepticism, his practical mind struggling to see the point. Seems like a lot of fuss just to avoid going to the store. Besides, he added with a hint of mischief, what will I do with all my spare time? Jessica, with a knowing smile, patted his arm. Trust me, this will open up a whole new world for you. Despite his reservations, Albert allowed her to guide him through the process. An hour later, he had to admit there was a certain satisfaction in adding items to a virtual cart. The website had been confusing, and he had fumbled a few times, but Jessica's patient guidance had made the experience manageable. When they finally hit the checkout button, a surge of triumph and accomplishment bubbled up inside him. It was a small victory, but it represented a significant shift, a move from a life of predictable routine to one where the unexpected, with all its accompanying joys and challenges, had become a welcome and invigorating part of his everyday existence. 2 days later, the sound of the doorbell jolted Albert from his quiet reverie. As he shuffled to the door, he was greeted by the cheerful face of a delivery man, pushing a cart laden with boxes. Albert's heart leapt with an unexpected thrill as he saw the assortment of packages marked with familiar grocery store logos. He nearly whooped with delight as he began unpacking them in his kitchen. Fresh tomatoes, their vibrant red a promise of summer's sweetness, bread, firm and uncrushed, and an array of treats he might not have chosen himself but now seemed like delightful surprises. As he set everything out, a grin spread across his face. It was a tangible reminder that perhaps this modern world, with its conveniences and novelties, wasn't as unappealing as he had once thought. Jessica, standing in the doorway with flour-dusted hands from her latest baking escapade, looked on with a triumphant smile. See, she said, her eyes sparkling with the satisfaction of proving her point. I told you it was magic. The words, though light-hearted, carried a deeper resonance. They symbolized not just the convenience of online shopping, but also the subtle enchantment Jessica had brought into his life, turning the mundane into moments of joy. And then, as with all good things, it was time for her to move on. Jessica had found a job at the local diner in a tiny apartment above an old bookstore, nothing grand or opulent, but her eyes shone with a renewed hope and determination, a hope that reminded Albert of the bright-eyed optimism he had once seen in Mary. As the day of her departure approached, Albert found himself caught between the pang of farewell and the contentment of knowing their paths had crossed. On the morning of her departure, he helped her move her meager belongings. Each item, simple and unassuming, seemed to carry a piece of their shared history. As they loaded the last box into the back of her friend's battered car, something small and shiny caught his eye. It was the photo they had uncovered during their attic adventure, a snapshot of his younger self in comically wide flared trousers, with Mary beside him, both of them caught in the midst of a hearty laugh. The photo, now neatly framed in a simple wooden border, was more than just a keepsake. It was a symbol of the joy they had rediscovered together. Jessica held up the framed photo, her voice soft but filled with meaning. A thank you, she said, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and a hint of nostalgia, for reminding me it's okay to start over. Her smile lingered, as if she were savoring the final moments of their time together, and for showing me that even old houses, like old lives, can hold hidden treasures. As she drove away, Albert stood in the driveway, the framed photo clutched in his hand. The quiet of his home seemed different now, less oppressive, and more like a space filled with the promise of new beginnings. The treasure Jessica had left behind was not just a framed photograph, but the realization that life, even in its later stages, could still surprise him with its own brand of magic. As Albert shut the door behind Jessica, The familiar emptiness of his house hit him with an intensity that was both sharper and subtly different from before. The quiet felt profound, yet there was a new layer to it, infused with the echoes of recent laughter and shared moments. He glanced around the room, his gaze landing on the framed photo of his younger self and Mary, which had been so thoughtfully gifted by Jessica. Once buried under dust and time, the photo now stood as a testament not just to the past, but to the unexpected joy and renewed vitality that had flourished within his walls. It was a symbol of how even the most settled of lives could be touched by new experiences and connections. Feeling an urge to do something with the warmth Jessica had left behind, Albert's eyes fell on Mary's old recipe book. A smile tugged at his lips as he recalled Jessica's delight when she had discovered the recipe for Mary's renowned apple crumble. The memory was a gentle reminder that keeping all of Mary's warmth for himself seemed almost selfish when it could inspire someone else's new beginning. Impulsively, he wrapped the book with care, a small gesture to share a piece of his past with someone who had brought a spark of excitement into his life. The next day, Albert found himself standing in front of Jessica's new apartment above the old bookstore, a bundle of anticipation and nostalgia in his hands. As he knocked on the door, the sound of Jessica's surprised laughter from inside chased away his lingering hesitation. When she opened the door and saw him standing there with the wrapped package, her eyes widened with genuine astonishment. "This is for you," he said, handing her the gift with a touch of self-consciousness. "I figured you might need some inspiration for your new kitchen." Jessica's eyes danced as she carefully unwrapped the package, revealing the faded cover of Mary's recipe book. A wide smile spread across her face, and she looked up at Albert with heartfelt gratitude. Mary's recipes. "Albert, you shouldn't have." He shrugged, his gruff exterior softening with a touch of warmth. "It's no use to me sitting on the shelf," he said, a twinkle of mischief in his eyes. Besides, he added with a playful grin, "I never could master that apple crumble." Jessica's laughter, bright and sincere, filled the doorway. In that moment, Albert felt a sense of contentment that was both profound and invigorating. The house, though quiet once more, now resonated with the promise of new beginnings and the comforting reminder that life, even in its later stages, could still be enriched by simple acts of kindness and shared memories. A week later, as the library's fluorescent lights flickered overhead, Albert's gaze fell on a vibrant flyer pinned to the notice board. It advertised a community walking group, an inviting opportunity to join local residents in leisurely strolls through the town's picturesque streets and parks. He stood there, his fingers hovering over the phone number printed at the bottom. The thought of mingling with strangers, engaging in idle chatter, and navigating new social dynamics was daunting. It was a significant departure from his usual solitary routines. The old Albert, the one who had become accustomed to the comfort of predictable days and quiet evenings, would have found a way to avoid this unfamiliar venture, crafting an excuse to stay within his familiar bubble. Yet, as he stood there, the image of Jessica's bright, encouraging smile flashed in his mind. Her spirited enthusiasm for new experiences and her ability to find joy in the mundane had left a lasting impression on him. Her belief in the value of taking chances and embracing change had sparked a flicker of curiosity within him. What, he wondered, did he truly have to lose by stepping outside his comfort zone? With a deep, fortifying breath, he dialed the number on the flyer. The voice on the other end was unexpectedly warm and inviting, brimming with enthusiasm. They welcomed him to the group with genuine friendliness, which did much to ease his apprehensions. Their eagerness to include him in their regular walks through the town was heartening. The next day at the local market, he found himself engaging in a light-hearted conversation with Mrs. Bennett, who had always been a familiar face but had previously been a source of gentle, teasing remarks. They exchanged jokes, and he felt a surprising sense of camaraderie. The simple act of interacting with her felt like a small, yet meaningful, stepped toward re-engaging with his community. Albert wasn't transformed into a new person overnight. He continued to savor his quiet mornings, finding solace in his routine and the small rituals that had long been a part of his life. His garden, despite his best efforts, still seemed to grow more weeds than flowers. Yet, amid the comforting predictability of his days, a new and subtle shift began to take shape. There was a gentle infusion of freshness into his routine, like a new melody weaving through the familiar harmony of his life. He realized that he wasn't lonely in the same way he had been before. Instead, he was becoming more open to the world around him. The notion of embracing new experiences, of connecting with others in unexpected ways, had begun to resonate deeply within him. His interactions with the walking group and his engagement with familiar faces in the community were creating a richer, more varied tapestry of experiences. In reflecting on this transformation, Albert understood that life was not merely about sticking to what was comfortable or familiar. It was about allowing oneself the freedom to explore new opportunities, to connect with others, and to discover joy in the unanticipated. Each step, each conversation, and each new experience added depth and meaning to his days. The process wasn't about becoming someone entirely new, but rather about embracing the parts of himself that had been dormant and integrating them into his life. He found solace in the fact that life, with all its surprises and new beginnings, was an ongoing adventure. This new chapter was one he was learning to savor, filled with possibilities and discoveries that he had once overlooked. As he moved forward, he carried with him a renewed appreciation for the journey, open to the endless opportunities that life had to offer. As we wrap up today's exploration, I hope you found valuable insights into the themes we've discussed, from personal growth and family dynamics to the impact of our choices and the lessons life has to offer. What resonated with you the most? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please share one thing you've learned today and how you plan to bring it into your life in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave your comment, like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Your support helps us continue bringing you more meaningful content. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing your reflections and connecting with you in the comments.